Howdy, Vine Trippers. I wanted to take just a moment to talk to you about the Texas Wine Lover website and their phone app for both iPhones as well as Google devices. You can actually download this app, put it on your phone, or just go to the website if you're not an app person. And if you ever want to go visit some of these great locations that we've been talking about in the podcast, this will give you a great information about the place before you go. And you'll be able to find other wineries in the area. So if you want to make a day of it, go see several other places as well. You can search by region. You can sort the listings, find ones that are kid-friendly, family-friendly, even ones that host RVs. All kinds of different sortable listings you can find there in that app and on the website. You can find other things as well in the area like restaurants, accommodations, maybe events that are going on at the different wineries. So it's your one-stop resource that goes hand in hand with this podcast to be able to find those great places to go visit. So check out the Texas Wine Lover website. It's txwinelover.com. Or go to their app. You can find it on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store as well. Enjoy your trips among the vines and use that app. Texas Under Vine, an exploratory podcast to scout out the best Texas wine country has to offer. I'm your wine guide, Scott, and I'm here to lead you on an auditory expedition to the vineyards and wineries across the great Lone Star State. Each episode will cover a different vineyard, winery, or wine-related business operating in Texas. You'll hear interviews, descriptions, and details about each location that will excite you to visit and experience them for yourself. Ready to plan a wine tour? Use these episodes to choose the most interesting spots for you and your friends to check out. Most of all, enjoy hearing about the rapidly growing wine industry in the state and what makes our wines and wineries the best. Howdy, Vine Tripper. Welcome to episode 35 of Texas Under Vine. Today, my travels lead me deeper down the Wine Road 290 in the middle of the hill country of Texas, and I'm headed to Stonewall today to visit a little winery called Adega Vinho. For the interview today, I actually got to sit down with one of the owners and winemaker, Michael Bilger, and we got to talk a lot about some of the prestigious awards that they've been garnering recently and these wines that are just delighting the taste buds of everyone who comes to taste them there at Adega Vinho. Now, at Adega, they have an estate vineyard, and they do pride themselves on working with a lot of Portuguese style varieties. The name of the winery sprouts from that. And they do, though, have other varietals available, as well as things from the Rhone Valley and Spain and other places. But I don't want to spoil all that right now. Michael's going to tell you a lot about that during the interview. So a little bit of history of the winery. It actually was started by Michael and his brother Andy in 2016 when they purchased the land where the vineyard is right now. They originally planted about 4 acres of grapevines with the intention of just planting grapes at the start to sell and provide to other wineries. But as a lot of these stories go, they decided they wanted to make wine themselves sooner rather than later. So they established the tasting room, began to making wines. So now they have over 14 acres of different varietals on their property with eyes to expansion and adding even more as they go, which again, Michael will talk about in the interview. The name of the location, Adega Vinho, is actually inspired from Portuguese and Portuguese wine travels that Michael's brother Andy really enjoyed. And they decided to name it Adega Vinho, which is Portuguese for wine cellar. So as I said, they began growing these grapes on the property. And as time went on, after a year or two, they decided to go ahead and start making some wine. So they've actually begun with a 2017 and 2018 vintage for their wines. And although they do source some grapes from places like the Texas High Plains, they do pride themselves on getting about 70 to 80% of their fruit from the Texas Hill Country, including their estate, where they have a lot of these grapes being grown directly. Now, Michael really believes strongly in sustainability concepts when it comes to farming and with the vineyard. So they are planting things like cover crops to help with the soil. They are trying to be herbicide free. They're going into now their 4th year of no herbicides there on the vineyard itself. And another thing that he likes to do is release beneficial insects into the vineyard to help control some of the population of things that might be harmful to the vineyard itself. So he really likes the sustainability features that they do in the vineyard there at Adega Vinho. Along with the sustainability practices, Michael really believes in what he calls low and slow winemaking, just like a good Texas brisket. But he feels like there should be low intervention on the winemaking process to really allow the grape and the wine to speak for itself. And it must be doing right because they actually just celebrated a huge win in 2023. Their Viognier won the Grand Champion Award at the San Antonio Livestock Show and Rodeo Wine Competition, and that was the top wine of the whole event. And it was a white wine. It's the first Texas wine to ever win a Grand Champion Award at that. And so, huge honor. They won these really gorgeous silver spurs as the award. Of course, this is Texas, and I got to see those when I was there. A really amazing award and a really great accomplishment for this winery and this vineyard that has only been producing wine since, again, 2017 and 2018. Now, this last summer, you may have seen, if you follow much of the Texas wine industry, but they suffered a huge blow to their vineyard, literally a blow, when huge straight line winds came blowing through their property, knocking down some of their vines flat onto the ground. And it's a really amazing story. The pictures will blow your mind when you see them, and I'll include them here in the video part of this podcast. But Michael tells the story of many of his wine neighbors and friends coming out to help lend a hand to restoring those vines, and they didn't really lose a whole lot from it. So even though it looked really scary up front, they were able to survive that damage with only minimal problems and great cooperation from other vineyards and other people in the area coming to their help. Now, without giving away too much of the story in my preamble here, why don't I go ahead and go to the interview with Michael so he can share with you a little bit about the wines, the winery, and the vineyard itself. So let's hear from Michael. So I'm here with Michael Bilger at Adega Vinho, and we're going to talk just a little bit about his history and what we've got going on at this great tasting room. We're here in the tasting room itself. This is our first time on video, so we'll see how that goes. But first off, Michael, tell me a little bit about yourself. What got you into the wine industry?
Well, my brother is the source of my passion for wine. And that's sort of coupled with a few, your standard aha moments. So I went to school at Texas State, and we drank a lot of Becker wine, Becker Tempranillo.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where I'll start that whole process. Because at that time, I think you could get a bottle of Becker Tempranillo for $8 to $10. And we were just sitting around the campfire, one evening, and my buddy just looked at the back of the label and said, "Hey, this is made over there in Stonewall." And there was a girl who we were hanging out with there in college who grew up in the Fredericksburg area. She had a bunch of stories about Becker vineyards, and that sort of just sparked my intrigue. Fast forward a few years later, I started working for Jack Doherty at Bella Vista Ranch in Wimberley, building his trellis system on 2 acres of Sangiovese and Cab Franc that right now West Cave Cellars makes that wine for him. And so it's nice to see a vineyard that we planted in 2008 still around in the Wimberley area, still producing really high quality fruit. And so that sort of got my technical side and sparked my intrigue there. Once my brother he was curious what we were doing over there at Bella Vista Ranch, and the more we talked about wine, I realized, man, my brother he loves Texas wine. He loves wine from all over the world, but he was drinking Spanish Tempranillos.
Oh, okay. Rioja.
To me,
Rivera.
We were just buying cheap wine at the grocery store and, kind of being semi-romantic there in college, and sitting around campfires and whatnot. And I danced around the dance halls a little bit and tiptoed in the bluegrass scene a little
There you
bit
go.
there. And, bringing a bottle of wine on a Saturday night, drinking a bottle of wine after a bunch of beers is a fun, cool thing to do, right? So my intrigue was kind of sparked there. And then talking to my brother, he's like, dude, you have a green thumb. I've been in and out of agriculture, and I have a degree in environmental studies, a focus on geography, river systems, and rangeland management, and things like that. And have a lot of working experience in soybean and a little cotton here and there. And, it was just a natural progression of thought to think, well, we should try to grow some grapes. Mm-hmm. When are we going to do that? At the time, we didn't really know exactly when, but my brother has always had a dream of growing grapes and making wine. In a true sense, not a romantic thing like I'm going to retire and make wine someday, but, hey man, we have a little bit of property that, we can grow grapes on. So that was like early 2007, 2008 when I was over there working with Bella Vista Ranch. And
Okay.
then it just sort of started growing. I started coming out tasting the wines in the hill country, and, you'd taste a few wines here and there and they'd be all right. And then you'd taste a few that were pretty stellar, and I started looking at the labels and seeing, Texas hill country and being like, all right, this isn't just a pipe dream. It's actually, it's a true vocation for people who, it's not just a retirement or part-time job. There's people actually every day growing grapes and making wine. And I really love that aspect of it. So you fast forward a few years, and I was part of the 2016 viticulture enclave at Texas Tech for the professional degree in viticulture. Took some enology classes, started doing part-time, helping out, whether it was planting or harvesting or anything I could get my fingers into, and made that full dive in 2016 I'll back it up a minute. We had fooled around with the idea of planting grapes in the Blanco area at my old house, and that soil was just like anaerobic clay. So it was caliche dirt that not much grew in it. Right?
Yeah.
Hardly any grass. It was sticky and wet and just, it's beautiful. You think and look at the hillside and think, man, that's a perfect place to grow grapes. But in reality, there was no soil.
Underground is
and
a
there's
different
no
story.
drainage. So the water just kind of stuck into that caliche. So Andy and I started looking for a property to grow some grapes. And the original idea was find a property where the soil's good and we're in a grape growing region. And so those are two things that steered us down the road a little bit from the Wimberley Blanco area over here to Stonewall.
Okay.
And in 2016, I think June or July 2016, Andy and Elena found this old Schaefer-Cater property and closed on that. And by September, my dad and I were tearing down old fences and tearing down all the old barns and
Clearing the land
and rented a bulldozer and started trent ripping. And, I'd already established a few vineyards and had some time in helping out and had a really good kind of educational background on building vineyards and grape growing, but had never truly done it for ourselves other than a few test vines. And the vines that we originally I planted in Blanco just did not grow very well because of that soil.
Yeah.
And probably not fencing it also, thinking, the deer will never find a few vines. They grew, but not in the sense of commercial production of wine, right? So my dad and my brother and I and a few other friends, and until we realized we need to start, actually hiring a few people by the hour to help us out, we took on what we thought would be easy, with planting the first 4 acres we have out here. Now we have 14 acres of estate vines planted. We'll be planting up about 3 or 4 more acres in 2025. But the very first 4 acres are these vines that you see here from the tasting room, which are window sort of picture frames, the Sangiovese. Those were all planted in the spring of 2017.
Okay.
And my dad and I and my brother and my nephews, we built the entire trellis system. We did all of the work ourselves other than putting up the high fence. We hired that one out. And we took a lot of pride in that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of curves, learning curves, that we could have done some stuff different. We're changing some of that stuff up now as far as the everything's vertical shoot positioned here at the vineyard, but we're modifying some of that and leaning into some cane pruning and leaning into some head train stuff. We won't get too, technical, but, growing grapes and making wine, yes, there's some textbook things you need to follow, but there's also some working philosophies. You need to be able to foresee where your work is going because nothing happens fast.
Mm-hmm.
And, that burnout button is really close when you're growing grapes. So you just want to reach out and punch that burnout button and, wrap it up, right? Not the old saying, but you can't. You got to keep on moving forward and having an idea of where you want to see those grapes, how, where you want to end up. When we first originally planted the vines, I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. So I just had all the free time in the world when I wasn't working. My brother had 3 boys. 1 was in college and 2 were in high school. And so he was a hardcore weekend warrior. He and his wife, Elena, who's our general manager, tasting room, and she does, we all wear different hats. So the workload is equal throughout the year, but sometimes it's a little bit more demanding, like during harvest and whatnot, which we learn those very slowly and in some instances very quickly too. So the original idea is for the vineyard was to grow 4 acres of grapes and, sell them or make wine at another winery and try to bring on some restaurants, some wine bars that would sell our wine, and then slowly creep up into where we'd be producing, slowly creep up into the tasting room situation. We didn't want to be the first. We didn't want to be the best. We didn't want our last name attached to the winery name, even though our estate vineyard is the Bilger family vineyard.
Yeah.
But that's because it's a family vineyard.
That's right.
But our name is Adega Vinho, which is Portuguese for wine cellar, and we can get into that here in a little bit. But the idea was to slowly, incrementally grow these grapes, and our business plan was wide open. A lot of it, the way that my brother thinks, and it's tough for me to think the same way he does about business. I'm more of a let's figure out a plan or a protocol and stick to that. My brother likes to leave the loose ends, right? So leave options open. And that's an incredible way to think, and it takes a lot of discipline to think that way. But he's taught me a lot of that in that business sense, that if you believe in your outcome, the old saying, the journey there is where the most fun part, right? And so we're always having fun trying to get to the end, right?
We balance each other really well. So
yeah, it's a good balance. And so here we are 3 or 4 months after planting in the spring, and at the time, I was hanging out at Pernell Cellars, our neighbors, and Dave Culkin he doesn't realize it, but has taught me a lot about, the outside of the winery and the business, just talking to him. And, they go pick grapes out in the high plains, and I'd sort of tap along a little bit for a trip or two. And I mean, that's incredible knowledge that you can pick up just, some things are just done a little differently than you imagine, right? You never know until you get your feet wet and get into those situations. So sort of saw some internal writings of an industry and thought, you know what, let's speed this up a little bit. And when I was talking to my brother, he said the same thing. He goes, we're not going to sell our grapes. Let's get this 4 acres producing. Let's learn our basic vineyard management, and let's not focus on the original thought of, just parceling out some wine here or there. Let's make this a full-time gig. And so you fast forward a little bit, 2018, I got the viticulture degree. And so I had the education part and had some past experience, but all 2017 and 2018 vintage worked at Ron Yates, and he was an incredible sort of mentor. He and Todd Crowell, who I definitely would say Todd Crowell has pointed me in the right direction winemaking and taught me a lot of basics that I think would be harder to learn in a large-scale winery. So he taught me a lot of artisan boutique ways, artisan ways how to make wine that are based on science, but really heavily based in the philosophy of wine being an art. So the craft of wine is really what Todd Crowell's about. And so I give a lot of kudos to Todd for teaching me that stuff. And a lot of that stuff wasn't taught like, hey, here's how you do this.
Yeah.
he's busy making wine for Ron Yates, Spicewood. And so those 2 harvests were pretty incredible in my learning, ability to learn craft winemaking techniques, but on a larger scale. And, Reagan carries a lot of that stuff out now. Todd's not with them anymore.
Okay.
But he's a good mentor of mine. Todd is on the phone if I need to talk to him, and I'll forever be grateful of that relationship. Has pointed me in the right direction just because he likes certain winemakers in the world, and you can't help but sort of learn from the dude who you're learning from.
Right.
So then you start venturing out and reading about why these people make wine, these other people, and how they do it. You get a lot of experience kind of trying to figure out how certain people make wine. And, that may not be learned experience firsthand, but fermenting wine is, fermenting grapes is it's a science, but there's a huge artistic part without trying to sound too,
it's not just all technical.
It's not all technical. And regions, weather, those all reflect on the technical side. And, if you read an Australian winemaking book and apply it to Texas wine, you may mess your wine up. It may not be the best. So I would say in the cooking world, you could follow that recipe and it would be beautiful no matter where you are for the most part, right? In winemaking, there's a lot of different nuances to wine, or nuances to the grapes that could steer that wine to be not exactly what it would be if you would have followed that recipe and the place where the origin of that wine.
Maybe even the same grapes from harvest to harvest, the way they...
Oh, yeah, in Texas, that's a huge other story for Texas is we're so dynamic in our seasons, meaning one year is always different from the other. So our vintages are very different. So our vintage starts the year before, really. So, like now it's December 18th. There's no leaves on the vines. They're in dormancy right now. But those roots are still growing underneath. There's still
activity going on.
There's still physiological activity in the vine.
Yeah.
It is dormant and it is resting, but there's still stuff going on. We still water in the winter, keep that root zone wet. So when those buds open up in the early spring, they have the water and the nutrients they need, and that's part of the vintage. So the vintage is starting the year before, and you can get really philosophical about it too. And that's often I can take people down a very holistic view of things, but there's also science to back that up too. And so we lean into both.
Okay.
With our growing and our winemaking. But to get back to the original question, Todd Corallo was my serious mentor in wine, and I have a few others too. My work ethic, I can actually look back now, and when it comes to building the vineyard, Jack Doherty was a great mentor for me for the few months that I was building vineyards for him back in 2008. So, people rub off whether you realize it or not. It may take a few years, it may take 10 years later, but people's work ethics and their attitudes, they rub off. And that's one thing I think you learn when you have a true passion and you're thinking, well, how did I figure this out? Or how did I learn that? And it's like, someone just didn't tell you.
Yeah.
You kind of learn that over time.
Your
influences, and then you may not think about it until later. And you start seeing dots connect. You want to be retrospective like that.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to do that. It can drive you nuts too. So I don't recommend doing that all the time.
Who are those influences or those people that led that lineage in?
Here in Texas, there are, and I won't name names, but I will point to one or two different people who have had massive influence on the Texas wine industry. And those two people are Bill Blackman and a lesser known, unless you're in the industry, is Jim Brown. And, he was one of the original winemakers at Becker and Pedernales.
Okay.
And he's worked as winemaker consulting job, and his son's seriously active in vineyard management with some of these wineries. And a lot of the true lineage of local wineries here, established wineries, somehow they're one or two links off the chain of Jim Brown and Bill Blackman. So if you follow who taught who what, you can often come back to those two guys. And I I would like to say I'm of the school of Todd Crowell.
Yeah, there you go.
Reagan jokes around and saying that he went to TCU, and I guess I will too, and that's Todd Crowell University.
There you go.
I'm not going to give him 100% of everything that I do now, because there's probably some stuff that he didn't do or wouldn't do that I do in my winemaking. But that's the beauty of winemaking, is that there's a lot of different ways to make wine. Adega Vinho, one of our main focuses, Andy and I had, or one of our main kind of concepts or ideas of how to steer our business is, we don't necessarily need to hire a consultant for the easiest stuff, like putting a trellis system in. That's very basic knowledge. You may want to bounce some questions and do a little research before you build a trellis system, but why would we want to do exactly what the next door neighbor's done and learn from their mistakes? We'd rather learn from our mistakes. So you can take that concept and idea into winemaking, which that could be an expensive mistake in the winemaking part of it. But it's important, I believe, in Texas to experience your faults, because we're such a new industry, and the grape growing is so different here than it is in other parts of the world. In other parts of this country, it's so different. And so I think it's important to experiment and or just learn from your boo-boos or your faults. Yeah. Because making wine with Texas Hill Country grapes is so different than making wine with cool climate grapes that are grown in northern Washington. It's just a totally different game. It all comes back to the same science, but just applied differently. And so let me get back to kind of our history. Once Annie and I decided, they're about early 2017, I was already working with Ron part-time here and there, helping the cellar. And by July 2017, I said, hey, or June 2017, I said, hey, do you need a harvest hand? And Todd was like, yes. So that started my larger, big picture winemaking career. Andy, at the same time, he was saying, you know what, we need to make estate wine ourselves. So we started doing started working in the cellar in 2017 and experiencing the 2017 harvest, which was an amazing one. So across the board, usually 2017s in Texas are pretty outstanding wines. It's a great vintage for all regions of Texas, the Hill Country, the High Plains, the Gulf Coast. So those bottles are probably few and far between as they were 2-3 years ago, but pick up in 2017s and get a good idea of Texas terroir, right? And so about mid-harvest, he said, I think we need to, aim at having a tasting room. So that's when my ideas of making wine on a very small scale sort of broadened into having a tasting room.
We're getting serious now.
Yeah, now we're starting to get serious. So just surround yourself with people in the wine industry, learn as much as you can from your friends, read as much as you can, get as much firsthand experience as you can. And no one knows everything about winemaking. And I think that's one of the dilemmas in Texas, is that there's a few people out there who may have a platform larger than others who say, this is the way it has to be.
Right.
And I respect those people's opinions, but I don't think there's only one way to run a tasting room. There's not one way to make wine. There's not one business plan. That's the beautiful thing about doing business in Texas, is that you can be as, you can create whatever you want to as far as how you run your business. And so about mid-2017 is when the ideas for the tasting room, the ideas for a production facility started coming into play. The idea of how we'd use this beautiful property here in Stonewall to enhance your experience, to enhance the wine. So we like the idea that the tasting room and everything you can't see from the road. We like the idea of being basically surrounded by the vineyard now. So it used to be that you just look out to the east and you'd see all 12 acres over here. And this spring we just planted 2 acres of Chardonnay. Oh, cool. So we have a Chardonnay on our southwestern side. And so you're almost surrounded completely with grapes. By 2025, we'll have our northwest section of our property will have 3 or 4 more acres planted, majority white grapes. And so we can lean into more whites and more sparkling wines. And, when you come to Adega Vinho, you're going to experience the true Texas estate boutique wine experience. And that's grapes that are grown on property that travel maybe a production circle of sometimes 200-300 feet. That means where they're grown to where we make the wine to point of sale here.
Mm-hmm.
Those grapes or that wine has only maybe traveled 300 feet, not 300-400 miles, even though we do make wine out of grapes that were grown in the high plains in West Texas. Some years, 80 to 90% of our grapes have been grown in the hill country. This year is about 70%. And so we take a lot of pride in our relationships with our growers. And to the point we're at now, we love to talk about Texas hill country wine. So there was an evolution of business plan. There was an evolution of, who's going to do what. So that all came into play as we were learning more and more about what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so it may have been a dumb way in some, there's some boo-boos there and some mess-ups, right?
But like you said, you learn from your own mistakes.
Yeah, you do.
Part of the process.
Right.
Well, and I know that there's incredible challenges with doing your own vineyard and all of that. One of those I saw this summer during the height of the growing season on social media, a photo of all of a sudden multiple of your trellises completely flat on the ground and through a storm with big high winds. Tell me about that.
Well, I never thought I'd ever have to go through PTSD, but I do have some PTSD related from that situation. So I remember the date. It's the summer solstice. It was June 21st. And my wife and I had gone and saw the Houston Astros and New York Yankees play.
Oh, cool.
The day before on the 20th. And that morning we drove from Houston to the back here to the Stonewall. And I had a little weather alert saying rogue storms, in the area. I looked at that and thought, man, we need the rain. Great. We're ripening on the vines. We're halfway through veraison on our white wines. We have about a month out on our red wines. What a perfect time to rain.
Yeah.
We need some. Pull up to our house here in Stonewall, and the wind just hit our house like a freight train. And barbecue pit went blowing. I thought, man, that is some incredible wind. So I call up our vineyard manager and Tony. Both Tony and I manage our vineyards, but he's here on location, and he has a true passion for growing grapes and helps in the winemaking process as well. And Tony said, man, the wind is incredible. I haven't seen it, this strong in a long time. And he said, I'm actually going to go turn the water off because, the rain clouds are about to just dump buckets of water on us. I mean, they were low and they were huge thunderstorm head. And so I said, all right, well, call me back if there's any damage. Because I thought, our nets are up, our canopies are huge, and there may be some hail in there. And he calls me back about 10 minutes later and says, uh-oh. I said, what? And he just goes, I can't believe it. I said, well, what exactly are you talking about? And he's like, you just have to come and see. Don't be mad when you pull up. I said, oh, shoot. So I'm thinking, I said, well, was it hail? He's like, the wind's incredible. I said, okay. So I tell my wife, I'm like, I'm going to go to the vineyard for an hour. I bet we have some hail damage, or we have, some vines that are blown over. That happens sometimes.
DEFCON 4, here we go.
So long story straight, which we thought was a tornado that hit our vineyard, was just some incredible downdrafts.
Mm-hmm.
Our neighbors recorded 80-mile-an-hour sustained winds for 4 minutes. There was damage done at
hurricane level.
Yeah, hurricane level. There was damage on the roofs at Berg's Corner down on 290, about a mile from here. The chocolate factory down the road had some serious roof damage. So I'm thinking, as I'm pulling up, man, a bunch of our vines have probably blown over. We probably have a roof or two. I'm thinking the winery, maybe, we have a slanted roof that's facing due west. And I thought I probably caught a lot of wind. Shoot, I hope, the rain's not too bad, and I hope it doesn't hail.
Yeah.
And I pull up, and I mean, my heart just stopped. All of our vines are laying on the ground. Complete 8 acres have been blown over.
Wow.
So that was a combination of a couple things came into play there. We had our netting up. We had our netting up, which creates basically a sail.
Yeah.
The wind came from northwest at 80 miles an hour for 4 minutes. You can just think of that when you're full canopy, the leaves catching all that wind plus the net. The ground is ultra soft because it had rained the day before. So you put all that together, it was the perfect storm to blow over the trellises. Our end posts didn't blow over.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our cordon wires had broke or just had enough stretch in them that our vines blew over to about a 45-degree angle. Now, it looked worse than it truly was. We'll see here in next spring, or this upcoming spring, how bad the damage was done if we had trunk damage. But we did have a couple saving graces with the vines, and that was the ground was wet. We had been watering all year, so we didn't have brittle wood. We didn't have dried, stressed.
Yeah.
The vines were stressed because of the drought at the time, but we had sufficient water within the first 2 weeks prior to that because of storms plus our supplemental irrigation. So that really came into play. So, what did I do? I knew I couldn't do anything. That happened at about 5:30 in the evening.
Yeah.
I knew I couldn't do anything that evening. So I called Tiffany and I said, you need to get down here and see.
Yeah.
And I called my dad and a few other people and my brother, and they all came, and there's just no words to describe 8 acres laying on the ground. And I'm really hard on myself. And I thought, man, I built this vineyard and here it is laying on the ground. So we have roughly 6,500 vines out there in that 8 acres. And I would say about 50 of them were visually damaged, meaning cracks in the trunks. We had some broken trunks that were just unavoidable. But 50 or 60 is not bad out of 6,500.
Right.
So there were some management techniques that came into play a week or two later. But so what did I do that night? A lot of people say, well, what did you do, man? Like, did you just go home and beat yourself
for a little while?
I went to our 2021 port, and I filled up 2 glasses of port wine, and it's beautiful. It's estate, 90% estate. And I went and sat down with Tony, my right-hand man, and we just talked about what we're going to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's all we did.
This is our plan.
We didn't bitch and complain. There's you
gotta go
talk
forward.
about being slapped with humility, and facing some pretty extreme challenges. So in the morning, I woke up at 5:30, 6 a.m. and got here, and I started getting texts from the community. So the very first text I got was from Tyler and Bob Turbyville over at Narrow Path saying, how can we help? We just drove by last night and saw it. We didn't want to bother you last night, but how can we help? We're on our way to come over and give you a hand.
Nice.
They brought a few people from their tasting room. Minutes later, Reagan and Ron call and say, hey, we got our crew. We can take a day and come over and help. My brother's here on a Bobcat. We created a system. My nephews came out. Some neighbors came out. Don't want to leave anyone out of that story. But we had a lot of people locally here that just kind of rallied to the distress, right? And they were rallying to the distress over here at Berg's and the chocolate factory. The neighbors went out there and helped rebuild the roof, and that's a true community spirit. When damage happens from a natural disaster, there's people out there immediately in this community.
It's like an old school barn raising, but it's a vine raising.
It's a vine raising. It truly was. We had about 8-10 people. We had so we basically got our hammer on our Bobcat. We went and bought T-posts and created a temporary trellis for the year. We're actually about to start rebuilding the whole trellis system here. And we did some vine raising. And that was about 8 or 10 people. Then we hold the vine up. We get a T-post. Put it in. Just pick the vine up every 20, 30 feet.
Yeah.
And that took us 2 days. And so a full 2 days after they blew over, we had them all up.
All back and running.
All back up. And we did a really nice estate Vino Verde out of some of that white wine. We had enough fruit hanging on the Arinto and the Alvarinho to also do our Bronco State Reserve, which is a cellared, a little bit higher alcohol, cellared New French oak white wine, which we just went through and is beautiful. So we were able to get the vines off the ground before there was any significant damage to the grapes themselves. If you wouldn't have known that the vines were laying on the ground, 3 weeks before we picked the grapes, you wouldn't have believed that there was anything that was wrong with that vineyard. So massive thanks to all the people who came out to help us. I've given wine out and I try to repay that way, but just thank you. If there's ever an issue and I don't know about it, call me up, we'll be there to help you out. And so that was a humbling experience, but it was also created a lot of, we feel really gracious to live here, right? If that's, or grateful to live here, if that's the right word. And it further kind of drives our pride in this region or this area for Texas wine, because so many people came out and helped out. We forget that it was 104, 105 degree top temperatures those days.
Yeah.
And that was hot. It was miserable. And it had just rained for a few days, so it was humid. We had mosquitoes, intense mosquitoes out here during that time. And everyone was just so helpful and cheerful. And like, at the end of the day, you're like, man, I'm breathing so shallow, right? Like, I need to catch a breath, right? And it's like, you realize there's no way you would have been able to do what we did without the help of that 15, 20 people who came and helped us out. So thank you, everyone.
I love to hear that.
If anything pops up, let me know.
I love to see that. There's so much of a spirit of cooperation and
there is
community, and that's really great among the wineries. Well, let's talk a little bit about the name of the winery for a second. You mentioned it a moment ago, Adega Vinho. So you were going to say, is there a story behind that, the Portuguese naming and things like that?
Well, so there's kind of twofold story, and they both go back to my brother. So really thank him for enjoying Spanish and Portuguese wines, or Iberian wines. That's a great place to start. Or that's a great point in anyone's winemaking career. Often you hear about how cheap Italian wine is. Well, today it's not as cheap as it was 10 years ago, but you can still pick up amazing bottles of Tempranillo for under $15 or at $15 price points that are grown in Spain. So the price point to taste phenomenal wines from a phenomenal growing region, it's not difficult to do. Whereas if you want to drink some, Burgundian, it's going to set you back a little bit. When we first started deciding which plants we wanted to grow, which grape variety we wanted to grow here, it was easy to just say, we'll grow all Tempranillo. But we thought, well, let's plant a few small lots of our first 4 acres. So we decided on Tempranillo, which was a no-brainer. It reflects our hot weather. It's a hot weather grape. It makes beautiful red wine. You can get away with some rosés out of Tempranillo. So we planted 1.5 acres of that. We planted 1.5 acres of Mourvèdre, which we'd have had some stellar Mourvèdres from William Chris has a whole program on Mourvèdre, and other wineries in the area do too. So that was a great example of, hey, this grows great in the hill country and makes phenomenal wines.
Good solid standard choice.
And so did 1.5 acres planted 1.5 acres of Mourvèdre, Mourvèdre,
however you want to pronounce
however you
it.
want to slaughter the French pronunciation. There's like 200 and some odd different synonyms for Mourvèdre. So then we planted 0.5 acre of Touriga Nacional because it's a hot weather grape. And Andy said it kind of delivers a larger, more supple red. And it has a bunch of wild, unique attributes. The tannin, the aromatics of the wine are very distinguishable. So you can tell that that's a Touriga. Often some wines may fall and they're like, is that Merlot? Is that Tempranillo? Sometimes you may be stuck in a little box on some wines. We had some thoughts of, what white wines we're going to plant. And at that time, I didn't really want to plant any white wines. I thought there was this taboo thing about Texas Hill Country whites, which actually turns out to be the exact opposite in our book. But Andy did some research, and we were going to plant Alvarinho off the bat, but he did a little bit more research and kind of followed his quirky wine journey and thought there's a grape out there called Arinto, Arinto, that at the time we didn't even know. Doug Lewis has had a few acres planted, and the nursery we were working with when we were buying our stock, they had Arinto, and they said that they thought that it would do well. It's it's a hot weather white and loose clusters, thick skins, but they had an ability to retain acidity at a higher sugar level.
Oh, okay.
Because they're planted around the world and just based on what that grape is doing in other regions, we thought, well, Texas would be a great place for that. Just so happens that we have issues with retaining acidity as we ripen here because of the heat. So we thought that would really help us out in our white wine program, and it's a leading contributor or a leading blending white grape for Vino Verde production.
Okay.
And then we sort of wanted to take our Alvarinho that way, sort of the Vino Verde style, even though we make it into more of a Rhone style. But we're about to have our Vino Verde here for 2024 in the spring.
Oh, cool.
So we chose test plot of Arinto, which was 17 vines and a few Alvarinho, and they grew great. They did a fabulous canopy, and training was very similar to what we were doing with our Mourvèdre. So we had that original 4 acres. We also planted about 200 Sangiovese vines, and they did really well. So we thought, well, we're going to plant more of everything we have. So in 2019, we planted our larger vineyard, which we call the North Block. And that was an additional 8 acres on vertical shoot positioning, or the trellis style, VSP training style. And so we ended up planting another 1.5 acres of Touriga Nacional, 1.5 acres of Arinto, 0.5 acre of Alvarinho, some more Sangiovese, but we also added into that some more traditional Portuguese varieties, which are Tinta Cow, Susau.
Okay.
We also planted more Tempranillo and more Mourvèdre.
Okay.
And then here's one that just sort of came out from the blue, but they didn't have enough rootstock at the nursery to plant as much Tinta Cow or Susau as we wanted. So we had this 0.5 acre. So we decided, being the masochists that we are, we would make it really troublesome and throw another variety in there.
Yeah.
So we planted Cab Franc and 0.5 acre of Cab
cool.
Franc, based on a lot of traditional Iberian blends have Cab Franc as a backbone to them. So a lot of Tinta Cows and Touriga based wines, if they're made into red wine, often are blended with some Cab Franc. And the Cabernet Franc grows beautiful out here. And so our name, Adega Vinho, is reflective on our varieties, but B, both Andy and Elena, my brother's wife, went to Portugal to visit wine regions, visited the ocean, and they came back with this sense of a name, Adega Vinho, which is Portuguese for wine cellar. And that was just sort of an idea that they had, So House of Wine or wine cellar.
Theme,
yeah. So House of Wine, they said, my brother will tell you that in Portugal, some of the cooler places they went to was like House of.
Yeah.
You already knew what it was by the name when you're entering a restaurant. So they just thought that would be a cool name, sort of get the spotlight off of our original name for our estate, which is Bilger Family Vineyard.
Yeah.
But, I didn't want to raise, it's just kind of a colloquial family vineyard, right? Which it's fine for our labels and it's fine for our vineyards here, but we didn't want that as our
your brand name.
Our brand name. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Brand name. Yeah. Because you do. Let's face it. You have to make money and you have to have a brand name. And our last name, Bilger, is it's Alsatian and it's difficult to pronounce.
Right.
So Adega Vinho is.
It doesn't trip off the tongue as well.
Neither does Adega Vinho, but it reflects on what we are. So we grow 9 different varieties. Well, now we're at 10 different varieties of grapes on these 14 acres. and 5 of those are traditional Iberian. So, like I said, Tinta Cow, Susau, Touriga Nacional, Arinto, and Alvarinho. Also, we grow Tempranillo and Mourvèdre, which are grown throughout the world, but heavily in both Spain and Portugal. And we've just recently planted an acre and a half, a little bit over an acre and a half, acre 0.65. So I just go ahead and say 2 acres.
Round it out
of Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And I really love Chardonnay. I love what you can do with it. And I love the old sort of challenging thing that, yeah, you can be a winemaker, but if you can't make decent Chardonnay, you're not worth anything. And I also like sort of the challenge of the people love to say, well, Texas can't grow Chardonnay.
Right. I've heard
we have great examples of it growing very well at Texas Hills and Johnson City. I mean, those are some of the oldest producing vines in Texas, planted almost 38 years ago. And we had the privilege of making a few vintages of Chardonnay. Well, from that vineyard, one of the vintages, our 2020 Hill Country Chardonnay, won a double gold at San Francisco Chronicle and was in the group of Napa and Sonoma grown Chardonnays. That was a $45 plus Chardonnay category. And that was the first time that I've been a double gold, I believe, in that category.
Wow, congratulations.
So from the San Francisco Chronicle. And that wine also...
That little old wine competition.
Yeah, that little one. So that's, that's the top 3 wine competitions in North America.
Right.
And, you're playing in a pretty...
At the major leagues over there.
Major leagues. You're playing in a pretty professional field there. And so it was... it was great to be able to see our wine was
stacking up,
was received so well.
Yeah,
that's a true testament to terroir.
Yeah,
I believe that place does matter where these grapes are grown. There's a lot of other contributing factors that matter, but that is one of the, I believe, main factors is where it's grown, how it's grown, who's doing it.
Howdy, Vine Trippers. Did you know that I now have a merchandise store for Texas Under Vine? I only have a handful of limited items, but you can go check those out and wear your Texas Under Vine swag if you'd like to tell all your friends about the great wine locations we have here in Texas and maybe get them interested in the podcast as well. So there are things like t-shirts, there's a hoodie, there's a beanie, a ball cap, things like that. But one of the most exciting things I have right now is my limited time offer t-shirt. That's my Season 1 t-shirt. So this is your Tasting Through Texas Under Vine Season 1 t-shirt. It's only going to be available for a little short amount of time. On the back, it has all the different locations like a band tour t-shirt. So this is a limited time item and you can go out and get it now. And one of the great things about that t-shirt is a portion of every sale goes to support the Texas Hill Country Winery Scholarship Fund. So you know that by buying that t-shirt, you're also investing in the growing and flourishing of an amazing wine industry here in Texas and all of those people that are going to come and make it even better. Check out that merchandise store. It's on my website at texasundерvine.com. Just go up to the top. You'll see the link for the merchandise store.
Well, and that's a great lead in. We've talked a lot about your estate here and that you talked about sourcing just a little bit, but what's your vision of your estate terroir here? What would you say that is?
Well, so the vision of let's 2 or 3 fold here. So the vision of, how far will the estate go? Right now we have 14 acres of grapes planted. We'll probably plant another 3 to 4, maybe 5 if we feel like getting crazy. But, land around 18 to 20 acres of estate grapes. That should produce enough grapes that we wouldn't have to depend so heavily on other growers. But with that being said, we really lean heavily into a grower of ours in Mason County, and that's Rob Parr and Parr Vineyards. And we make wines, both rosé and red, out of a large portion of his vineyard. He grows upwards to 20, maybe a little bit more now, acres there up in Mason County, northwest of the city of Mason. And he has a very unique soil type up there, granite, limestone driven soils, beautiful water coming out of the Hickory Sands aquifer. and that just so happens to be the new AVA.
The new AVA, yeah.
The Hickory Sands AVA, which is, I guess I'm not sure exactly.
Coming in the spring. I just interviewed Dan McLaughlin about that and last episode. And he talked about in the spring is when it should come up for public review. Everything's kind of done on it. So.
Yeah. So, we're really looking forward to these smaller sub AVAs or micro AVAs popping up. I think myself, Doug Lewis, and a few others really are looking forward to this little region down here along 290 being Pedernales River Basin or Pedernales River Valley. But really, one thing to call it like, Texas Hill Country, but that's a large area.
Sure.
And so to really focus in on these small, unique areas is awesome. But back to the original question, we'll plant more. So we have 2 unique soil types here on the estate, and that's heavy clay, sandy loam, and then we have just a few feet away, the soil diversity is very unique out here in that we have really heavy clay, sandy loam in the upper elevation of our vineyard. And as the slope goes down, we have really sandy, almost beach sand, just limestone sand. This is all deposits from the Pedernales River back in glacial days. And so some people call the sandy beach limestone, Pedernales quicksand, because it's so loose. You can drive your tractor or truck through it and get it stuck just being dry.
Wow.
So that really does drive a lot of unique flavor and aromatic components of wine here in the Hill Country that you can taste from other producers along the Pedernales River here.
Right.
The popular one on these Tempranos and red wines is, a lot of people say it has a bit of a blueberry kind of finish, or in that purple fruit area. Yeah. I'd like to say that's a little bit reflective on that. On our whites and rosés, I'd like to say there's a very strong minerality or a very strong dryness. Or sorry, not dryness, but there's a uniqueness that really pops out on the whites and rosés from growing in this limestone sand or mix of limestone clay and sandy loam soil. So we're blessed with beautiful soils to grow our vines in. We're also blessed to be on a very slight hillside and sort of in the middle of the valley. So we have a constant wind from the south to the north during most of the year, and then our wind from the northwest in the winter. We always have airflow in our vineyard, which is nice. We don't have very many pockets where air is still.
Right.
And it has a lot to do with the placement of our rows, but it also is just the unique geography of this area and our place here. When it comes to the soil type and soil structure, we're always trying to improve that. And ways we improve that are leaning into heavy annual cover cropping.
Okay.
And so that is seeding our vineyard with this annual cover crop for the winter cover crop. We're doing a heavy seeding of Austrian winter peas, which also they're a legume, so they give a natural nitrogen. They put that back into the soil.
Yeah.
But we're no-till farming, and so we're really trying to improve the soil structure here through cover cropping. We also plant ryegrass and oats as well. There's some other crops that we've planted as well. We've done daikon radishes, we've done scavenging turnips, and so there's a whole reason behind that. But the main reason is, without being too specific or too technical, is to improve the soil structure so we lessen the stresses on our vines.
Okay.
Because those vines, everything comes back down to the soil that those vines grow in. The soil's going to make it or break it, including the finished product, which in the low intervention winemaking, low input winemaking that I do in the cellar, that's a very important component of the winemaking process, is the growing of the grapes. And I believe the way we make wine truly reflects on our growers and the good job that we're doing and that they're doing in the vineyard. Hopefully they're doing it in the vineyard. With Rob Parr, he's doing an amazing job. He's one of the ones who has learned so much from humility. He's growing, a bunch of different varieties, mostly Tempranillo, Mourvèdre, Graciano, a lot of Spanish varieties and Portuguese varieties. So we're very similar in that sense. But he also grows Semillon, Viognier, and a little bit of Chardonnay. So he has his fingers in the white wines as well. And those are estate-driven wines, terroir-driven wines. So back to our estate vineyard here. We've been herbicide-free for 3 years. We're about to go into our 4th year. If this happens to be a rainy year, we've had it easy the last couple of years with the drought. We haven't had to really fight weeds too much.
Yeah.
But we'll see how that goes. I'm guessing we're going to have to spend a lot more time in the vineyard this upcoming spring. Everyone's anticipating a wetter spring and summer with the El Nino. Yes. And those weather patterns all pointing at lots of rain. So, we're still learning. Yeah. And so we're entering our 4th year herbicide free. But the vineyard that we just established, the Chardonnay, we had lots and lots of, that was a forest of dead trees, and we ripped all those old dead trees out and all the shrub brush and all the old cedar, and tons of mesquite there in that Chardonnay field, which is separate from our other 12 acres. So we have had to use some herbicides out there to knock down all that intrusive plants that are growing. But here in another year or two, we're going to switch to no-till and herbicide-free on that almost 2 acre. Transition over to there. You can't let a philosophy make you work so much harder that you're taking away from your main objective, and that's creating the highest quality wine you can and growing the most premium grapes possible. So, there is a balance to everything. So we will transition the Chardonnay into herbicide-free and no-till for its first vintage, and that will be vintage 2025. Hopefully, will be the first picking of the Chardonnay vineyard. So we have a heavy focus on cover cropping. We use a lot of we lean into the regenerative ideas of carbon capture in our vineyard. So that goes hand in hand with the herbicide free. We also we don't till deep. We may scratch the surface a little bit to incorporate the seeds into the soil, but we're trying not to disrupt our first 6 to 8 inches of soil. That being, there's a lot of reasons behind that, but one of the main reasons I'm looking at it now is there's all these great benefits of no-till, but hey, it's hot here and we're in a drought right now. Even though it rained a few days ago, we're in a drought. Every time you rip that soil open, you're releasing tons of moisture and you're drying that soil out. So some of our vineyard practices have these qualities or these great attributes that we weren't necessarily aiming at, but there's some positive stuff coming out of it. So retaining more moisture in the soil by not tilling is extremely important to us because we are battling droughts on a annual basis here in the hill country. Now we're into it's been since 2021 we've had any significant rainfall, and here we're about to be into 2024. So that's really high up on our priorities, is retaining as much moisture in that soil year round as possible. So the regenerative techniques really help us out in that field. One of the other things that we just started doing 2 years ago, and this year about to lean into it real heavy, is using beneficial insects, so predatory insects like green lacewings, praying mantis or praying mantids. There's a few others. Releasing those at the right time of the season, so early spring into early summer. Creating a more predatory natural defense to our insect populations. Trying to keep our grasshoppers and our glassy wing sharpshooters at bay as much as possible. So rather than just spray and think of a contact pesticide, the holistic view is, and I jokingly say this, but let's send in the F-16 fighter pilots, let them do their job, and that's like the, that's your green lacewing, that's your praying mantids, and they're in there wrecking shop on other bugs, and so it's a funny way to say it, but let's send the Air Force in there.
There you go.
Ladybugs are pretty. Once it starts getting hot, they die off. But there's a arsenal of insects to use, and their numbers are huge.
Yeah.
So you have to use a lot of them, and it costs a lot of money. But you think of that compared to pesticides, which we will never let the pests get so bad that they're going to ruin our vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
But if we could get out of spraying pesticides and lean more into the beneficial insects.
Yeah.
One of the bad things about beneficial insects is that there are a few that we use that do bite or sting.
Oh.
So working in the vineyard can get itchy sometimes,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, having those green lacewings, having some of those beneficial insects are driving the wasps out and the hornets out. So,
Trade-off, yeah.
there's a trade-off. So as much as you spray pesticides, there's always going to be some wasps or hornets in your vineyard. And I believe that last year we saw hardly any of those after increasing our number.
Sure.
The price tag is real.
Yeah.
But if you can offset your management and not have to rely so heavily on pesticides, it's worth it. And it reflects in our cost, obviously, on our estate models.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of coming out to Adega Vinho is experiencing a very sustainable operation.
Yeah. Or losing rows of vines to PD because, you got the sharpshooters.
That's a real issue too.
Yeah.
And so we don't have much Pierce's disease out here yet, and hopefully we don't in the future. But that's something that every growing area in North America has to deal with, including California.
Mm-hmm.
Some areas far less than others. We happen to be sitting in one of the largest hotspots of the world for Pierce's disease. So, if everything was so easy, everyone would just grow grapes in one little region of the world. They're not. They're growing in, there's some equally or worse places to grow Vitis vinifera in the world than here. But this, I'm not going to say it's the best, but some years it's pretty good.
But the challenge makes that destination sweeter, right?
Yeah. It's like, there's that old saying, getting there is more fun than the
destination.
The adventure of getting to your destination is sometimes better than
the fun is in the journey.
Yeah, the fun's in the journey, right? So,
well, transitioning just a little bit from the vineyard itself to more of the wine side of it now.
Yeah.
Since you wear both hats, you are the grower, but you're also winemaker and all of that. You talked about it. You touched on it earlier. So you have your full production facility here now on site.
We do. Yeah, since 2018, we've been producing wine here. We leaned into our neighbors big time in 2017, 2018, and I was making wine. I was limited on my production in 2017 and 18 of how much I could make at Ron's, but working with Todd and Ron being so cool about it. Looking back, man, what a great opportunity. And I made a lot of our wine while I was working there in the winery, which at the time I didn't realize how just amazing of an opportunity that is. And, and at the same time, a big pain in the ass too.
Right.
So we were making wine over there. We had a small tank over at Pedernales Cellars where we made our white wine, and had some help there. And, until we were set up to be able to full-time make wine here at our location. So in 2018, I made 2 wines at our cellar, and that was our 2018 Sangiovese and our 2018 Merlot also.
Okay.
The Touriga and Merlot blend, which was our Cuvée Caramissime, which is very well received both from our customers and at the contest we enter. That was a blend of Touriga that I made solely over at Ron's. Couple tons of that, and then Merlot was blended later here once we consolidated our winemaking. But running around making wine at 2 different little areas, plus working a harvest, and then having this little thing in the back of your head going, man, that's crazy. You don't know that much about winemaking. You're making all this wine. Those are those kind of like false humility, whatever you want to call it, where that's you truly learn how to make wine. Like you could read a book all day, but until you're tasting the wine, until you're actively part of that process, that goes a long way.
Not until your hands are purple do you really know.
And so that was, like I said, an incredible opportunity. Both Andy and I learned so much working with Todd. and so or working for Todd. And so 2018, we built our winery, and we've been improving that winery since, whether it's tanks or, production tools or whatever you want to do. The
barrels
layout,
that you have to buy every year and all
or
that.
the layout of the winery. It's just it's in a moving evolution, right? So it's always, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You just got to get used to it, and figuring out what works in the winery. And recently I've been really thinking about, Benedict says, after a few years of operation, you sort of established your flora, right?
Yeah.
You established the yeast presence in your operation. And this year I made a lot of wine, which would be considered spontaneous yeast fermentation, which is, a little yeast from the vineyard, the yeast floating around in the atmosphere in the winery. And we've made beautiful wines following that idea of winemaking, or that philosophic approach to winemaking, and that's utilizing the yeast that's already naturally present. And we used it on whites from our vineyard. We've used it on whites from other other vineyards. We've used it on rosé and made considerable amount of red wine too, using that spontaneous or natural fermentation process. That doesn't mean that every wine coming out of here is spontaneous yeast fermentation, but a good amount of it is this vintage 2023.
Yeah.
And so the operations in the winery were much busier this year. We had a bumper crop throughout Texas, including at our estate vineyard here, and that's great. But it also has a downside, is I've never made so much wine in my life because we were contracted for certain tonnage or acres from other growers. And some of those growers didn't have a problem pulling back a little bit, and some of them needed to unload more grapes on others. So pulling back wasn't an option. So we just have to make the wine. And so incredible learning process, vintage 2023. I'll never forget it. I lost 30 pounds and lost my mind, but it's a great point to bounce back and realize, you can't do it the same way every year based on what you did the previous year, because Texas vintages are changing so much. This year, people weren't fighting over contracts. They weren't fighting over grapes. There's plenty of grapes. In fact, I'm not going to really get into it, but there, some people are saying there's possibly 50 to 100 tons. They're just alone throughout the whole state left on the vines, or that went on the ground. And so, we could get into a whole topic of discussion of out-of-state wineries moving to Texas, not producing Texas wine, but selling the idea of producing wine.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there, but it exists.
Yeah.
Talk about it with other people, but there's no excuse for 2023 not making Texas wine. I don't care what your business plan was or is. There was plenty of fruit to go around, and those farmers were calling everybody in the phone book trying to sell their grapes.
I got fruit.
And there was some very high quality fruit out there left on the vines, and you can't jump on every opportunity. There were some opportunities that, man, I really wish I would have got some Grenache this year, and there was some Grenache there later, but we were maxed out in production space. So, that's the kind of year it was for our winery, and 90% of the other wineries in the state of Texas, is that there was an abundance of fruit at a fairly high quality. And so despite the heat dome that we had in some areas and some varieties, and depending on whether you made white, rosé, or red, Texas is such a large state. The heat didn't apply to all vineyards. We had some amazing chemistries and some amazing quality fruit come out of this vintage. And we had the opposite because it was weather driven, whether it was rain or high temperatures for a sustained period of time. So I would say you sum up Texas winemaking as kind of rolling with the punches.
Yeah.
And so in the winery here for our estate vineyard, it is heavily based on spontaneous yeast fermentations. It's heavily based on whole cluster and whole berry fermentations, very low and slow winemaking without getting too technical. When I say low and slow, I mean time, but also mean low input winemaking. for our estate, that's what we hang our hat on.
Yeah. Like a good Texas brisket, low and slow.
Yes, low and slow, and don't touch it.
That's right.
All right. Keep your hands out of the smoker.
Don't open the smoker every so often to see if it's ready.
Keep your hands out of the wine. And it's hard to say, but it's true. And that's one of the things that Todd would always tell me. Quit messing with the wine. Forget about it for a minute and just let it be. And I know it's real simple to say, but it's very true in winemaking for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we're just throwing it out to the wind and
see what happens.
We're not just seeing what happens. In some cases, we may be rolling the dice in some areas, but there's still protocol. There's still a lot of thought given into the order of operations, if you will. But at the same time, we try to keep our fingers out as much as possible from the wine, and that is what Adega Vinho is about, and you'll taste that at our tasting room. So not only will you taste that in our estate wines, but you can look out and see where they're grown. And if I'm here, you can ask me if you can come see the winery, and I'll show you where I make the
production
wine.
facility.
So production facility, winery, cellar, whatever you want to call it.
So as a winemaker, what are your, and this is maybe a loaded question, but what are some of your favorite wines to make?
So my favorite wines to make, I hate to say it because everyone wants to say it, Texas is all about big, bold, and red. I love the beauty and the freedom of making white wines. Yeah. And rosés as well. But you have a lot of area to steer your wine in white wine making. You have this amazing ability to pick before it's too hot here in the hill country, and so you can really pick grapes that'll make your wine. I believe we're picking grapes 200 feet, 50 feet from our winemaking facility to maybe 40 miles in the beginning of harvest. We're not picking Lubbock fruit that early or fruit that's grown in West Texas that early. I'm interested in making white wines that are unique, that have elegance. When you take a sip of the white wine, you're going to say, wow, I didn't know Texas produced white wines to this quality. Yeah. And so quality is a big thing. Now, what does quality mean? Does that mean we're just, we make the wine and then we make sure everything's clean and get in the bottle on time? No, quality goes all the way back to the vineyard, from pruning to vineyard management, all the way up through fermentations to what they call élevage, which is post-fermentation, whether it's in barrel, whether it's in tank. That's a long management process. It can be short too, depending on the style of wine, but right now I really gravitate towards barrel fermented whites and French barrels. I enjoy American oak, but there's something about Bordeaux and Burgundy and the characteristics that they can impart into our hill country whites. We also make white wine from other regions of Texas, but hill country happens to be my favorite because I live and operate here and my family's here and our grapes grow here, and this is where we're at. So you may hear me talking about hill country more, and you may hear me talking about other estate growers, but I'm talking about those hill country estate growers because they're in the field managing their grapes, they're in the winery making the wine, and they're also there pushing the pen, putting the taxes or writing taxes and sending them off, and those are the people that I really hold up into
your high esteem.
A high esteem, right? If you want to say. But in the winery here, I'm just always focused on each lot of wine, and I really get caught up in kind of the craftsmanship view of the wine. So whether we're doing barrel fermentations with our white wines or in rosés, to fermenting in stainless steel tanks, just very interested in the craftsmanship of the winemaking process. And so there's a lot of different avenues you can go down, whether it's the tools, whether it's the process, whether it's where the hill country grapes are grown. That's what is my sort of passion in the winery, is being able to do that. On a larger scale winery, it's much tough to be able to make that style of wine, but we're not big enough, so we have more time,
more freedom there.
We have a little bit more freedom, and so I still enjoy making red wines, and so I don't view one as better than the other.
Right.
But right now, in my newer career of winemaking, barrel fermented or whites and rosés.
That's your favorite.
That's my favorite.
Well, and I know that. Congratulations, by the way. I saw that your Viognier just won a grand champion at San Antonio Rodeo. So you've got some notoriety going out there. What are some of the popular wines with customers? So what are the ones that you're really proud of that people say, oh, you got to get this when you go to Adega?
The 2022 Viognier Reserve. That's one of my I'm very proud of that wine for a couple of reasons. Hey, I'm proud of that wine for our growers, the V-Certs. That's not a hill country grown grape. That's grown up in shallow water, which is northwest of Lubbock, about 20 miles from downtown northwest.
Mm-hmm.
They had a vineyard that they sort of rehabbed in Viognier. When they first started talking about the Viognier, I was like, we don't know, but they've rehabbed it over the last few years.
Okay.
With Daniel Pate kind of leading that as a consultant. They were able to really grow some beautiful Viognier vines, and we've made Viognier the last 3 vintages with their fruit, but the fruit just becomes better and better every year. So if Jason's listening, we want more tonnage of Viognier, so I'm gonna plug that really quick. But that wine is a majority barrel fermented white.
Mm-hmm.
And then was cellared, 2022 vintage was cellared 100% on New French oak. And the wine was cellared Sir Lee, so the wine sat on the fine lees, and we stirred it a certain amount of times every month. And the life of that wine, we cellared that wine for 8 months in New French oak, maybe even into 9 months. So that's a heavy regimen of oak.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit higher alcohol wine. So when I bottled it, I was a little concerned that the alcohol would be a little high.
Mm.
But the fruit and the oak helped balance that out.
Right.
Helped balance that high alcohol. And so I enjoyed that Viognier. That's why we bottled it. But started hearing people from the tasting room telling me how great that wine was and how much they enjoyed it. And then people started thanking me for making a Viognier in that style. And I thought, well, no one's really ever thanked me for making a wine. And I'm not BSing. People started talking about that wine, whether it was a Facebook post saying, wow, this is a beautiful Viognier. And it was just like, okay, cool, man. We finally did Viognier right. Which there's no right or wrong, but Viognier can be a tough wine to work with. And long story short, we entered it in some competitions and it's won gold. We got some best of show or best of class. And the biggest compliment on that wine was the 2023 San Antonio Livestock Show and Rodeo's International Wine Competition. It won Grand Champion, which is the best wine of the entire contest. And so it's the first time that a Texas wine has won the Grand Champion.
Wow.
And it's a white wine.
Congratulations.
So it's thank you. And so that felt really nice.
Uh-huh.
Felt nice on that Tuesday morning to open up the email. And my brother sort of was opening up his emails at the same time. And I called him. He's like, did you just read that email? I said, at first I said, well, is that the Grand Champion of the Texas? He's like, no, that's the entire contest. I said, well, great. Contests go so far. It's sometimes wines show better some days than others. And so, not to say that's the best Viognier in the state. I'm not saying that at all. We don't have any arrogance in it. We don't think we're the best winemakers. We don't think it's the best wine ever. But it does show very well, and the customers like it, and our friends like it, and the other wineries compliment us for it. So it's real nice to hear some kudos on a wine.
It's a great reason for our listeners to come check it out, too.
And on a side note, hey, it's a Texas wine competition. Yeah. Texas wines should be winning the top awards at our Texas wine competitions. Yeah. It's one thing having a Texas competition where it's Texas versus Texas, but when you have international competitions, it is nice to see where your wines fall in the opinions of the tasters or the judges. And so we don't base our whole sales off of contest results.
Right.
But there's some that you want to brag on, and and not to mention they raise so much money for local scholarships. To be part of that and to help out that process it feels nice, and so it's good for the community. It's good for everyone. So.
Well, let's get to the gritty details so we got people interested in coming to check out Adega. So let's talk about what that looks like when somebody comes in, like what a tasting might look like.
So we have a couple different ways you can enjoy Adega Vinho.
Okay.
So when you come to the tasting room, we have a beautiful, outside seating area. You can sit on our patio. It's some modern architecture. Enjoy, sit in the sun or the shade, or you can sit out underneath our oak trees. And we take a nice care of our lawn. We take a lot of pride in our horticulture here at Adega Vinho, not just the grapevines, but we have red buds and local flora and fauna everywhere. We have deer munching on our grass here in the mornings. So you can come enjoy a bottle or a glass outside. If we're slow, we can do a tasting outside. If we're busy, we prefer to do our tastings inside the tasting room. We have a handful of sofa, coffee table, kind of living room feel seating areas here. And we have a large bar that we can conduct tastings at. And so we also have a food truck on premise, which is our Adega Vinho Casina, which is our kitchen. And Chef Mark, who hails from just outside of Burgundy, France.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's been in the United States for 20 some odd years cooking, and he made his way to Texas, and somehow our parallel universes found us.
Brought us
together, and his family is a wine family, and his brothers work at wine cooperatives, and he loves the idea of the work that we do here, and he contributes to our wine tastings by cooking food that, he makes pizzas.
Pears, yeah.
They pair well. He also has, this month, he's making rib and French-style brisket, not Texas style, but the fatty components of those, all three of those really pair well with our wines. And so, nothing's better than a glass of rosé and some mushroom risotto, or some estate white and some mushroom risotto.
There you go.
Or maybe a slice of pizza in our red,
Yeah.
And so they pair well. But he has he's an excellent chef and quirky personality that reflects on us pretty well too. So we enjoy him being here. So we have food options Thursday through Sunday at Adega Vinho. Right now we're open all 7 days a week. As we get slow, we may close out on Wednesday. But until then, we're open every day a week. Check us out at adegavino.com, obviously. Or check out our Facebook for hours. And
I was going to say, the operating hours and all that.
Our operating hours on Saturdays and Sunday, or Saturdays are 11. Well, before I quote it,
no worries.
You're probably not going to come here. We're not open any earlier than 11. We go from 11 to 12:30, depending on what day it is when we open.
Website's the best place to find that
place.
information.
We always close at 6.
Okay.
So,
gotcha.
Make a reservation if you want to sit inside is the best way.
Yeah.
But walk up, come and experience Adega Vinho.
And they can do that on the website, the reservations?
The reservations are on the website, or you can call us up.
So for your tastings, do you have a set flight of wines, or does the customer pick?
So we have a set flight of wines, and it's changing all the time.
Okay.
So seasonal, I would say sometimes weekly. So during the month of October, we had a 100% estate tasting. So that was estate whites, rosés, and reds. And so, like I said, during the month of October, we were 100% estate tastings.
Okay.
And so that was 5 estate tastings.
Right.
And, there's a bonus or a revisit pour. Right now we have estate wines sprinkled throughout our menu, but I like to focus on a lot of small lot wines.
Yeah.
So one thing that kind of sets us apart is, we're not on a calendar of changing up our tastings. Sometimes our tastings change because we may run out of that wine, or maybe we have a few wines that we want to showcase that are ready to drink now, and we think we'll pull some of the wines back, and we'll present some of these new wines and see how they do. So I always want to, Annie and I always want to make sure that people know that if you visit us in February, when you come back in March, April, May, June, whatever that is, you come back in a couple months, you're guaranteed to have a new wine out. Sometimes we're back and forth in a month. We'll have 2 different tasting menus. we're producing a lot more white wines, and so those white wines are in smaller lots. So, once we're at the very tail end of our Alvarinho and Riesling, but we've had our estate whites on. We're about to bring them back on full force.
Okay.
And so here very soon you'll have the opportunity to taste maybe one or two vintages of our estate whites and see what our program's about here.
And how much does a tasting cost?
Tasting of 5 plus a repour is $25.
Okay.
And so we're an estate-driven winery, so you'll taste wines here that you can't taste anywhere else.
Anywhere else.
Yeah. And we have some of the same discounts. If you buy 3 bottles, we'll refund a tasting, and we have some case discounts and things like that.
Family friendly, pet friendly.
Very family friendly, pet friendly. Okay. We all have kids, and we're very family oriented here at Adega Vinho, and we don't want to have any exclusivity where you have to travel with kids, and that's part of life. And if you have the opportunity to do that, bring them out. It's as long as they're not going crazy in here, we're fine with it. So,
any maximum group sizes?
The larger your group, the more important it is for you to make a reservation.
Okay.
But we're not going to limit that. We have outside seating. We have a pavilion outside that we can move if it's too busy or too large of a crowd. So, communication is the key to all success. So if you want to succeed in your wine tour, give us a call. We'd love to answer the phone and talk to you. Go to the website, make a reservation. If there's any questions or concerns, just send us an email or call us.
Okay.
You'll get a reply.
What's your busy and slow seasons? What's the best time for somebody to come visit?
Well, our busy and slow seasons are so dependent on weather.
Yeah.
And so obviously our spring is our very busy time, but we're about to enter into a pre-Christmas kind of crowd. And that's families getting together and coming out and sitting down, having a glass of wine or a bottle. If the weather's nice, there'll be people here.
Okay.
But some of the best times, I believe, are the fall and the spring for our estate. If you want to really experience the outside and sit under an oak tree or sit out in the sun in the winter and gaze upon our vineyard or
among the vines, right?
Look at our neighbor's pasture. It's beautiful in the spring. That's the best time to do it. But
okay.
We have air conditioning, so the summers are great here too. So you can come inside and have a tasting, and it's just as nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you offer a wine club?
We do have a wine club.
All right. What are some of the benefits, and how do people join?
So one of the benefits of our wine club is we're not constantly trying to sell you a wine club. Okay. So we don't, the second year here, some wineries, the very first thing you hear is join our wine club, and here's all the benefits. You have a very simple wine club. That's 4 times a year, maybe 3 on certain years, but we don't charge you if I say that jokingly, but if we don't have enough wine, we're not going to release wines. Mm-hmm. So it's a 3-bottle club, which is our friends club. Then we have a case club, which is our 12-bottle club. And those are both quarterly releases. And with that, some of the benefits are some discounts for yourself, free tastings, some free glasses of wine, some benefits if you bring some friends in. But our parties are really what is the true benefit. Yeah. So when we have a release, we have a true party, we have a true meal, not just some little tiny bite to, we go full, we go full sail on our parties. Eat, drink, be merry, and bring a chair and enjoy yourself. Sometimes it's picnic style, sometimes it's inside, sometimes it's buffet style, but we always try to have a band. And we're about to, get into some other little areas. We have a friend who blows glass, and we're thinking about having them out doing a little demo during one of these, just to kind of,
fascinating
fun,
to see,
fun things. And so our parties are really what I believe sets us apart for our 3-bottle and case club. Our case club, we try to do a founders dinner every year, and that's just a free dinner where we get all the case club members together, and they get a few wines that we don't have behind the bar for sale. So I make a barrel or 2 of something special for the case club every year, and that is some intimate barrel tastings.
Sure.
When I say intimate, that's one-on-one with me.
Yeah.
Maybe one-on-one with my brother and I, and we're testing or tasting some barrels, and the wine is always hand chosen by my brother and I.
Okay.
For each release, we time that. The wines that are released are because the wines are ready to drink.
Right.
And so that's another thing is we're still selling 2019s because we're just releasing some of our 2019s and 2020 reds because they're finally to the point where we want to release them. We don't have to just release wine because we have it in a bottle. We started making wine in 2016 and we didn't open our doors till 2020. So we had solid 4 vintages there of wine waiting to open. So
age and ready to go. Do you, I know when you first started, you talked about the idea of just growing the grapes here on the estate and maybe then branching out to distribution or selling those. Do you do any kind of distribution or do you only sell here in the tasting room?
So we sell here in the tasting room. Most of our sales are here in the tasting room, but we are sprinkled out into some restaurants in Fredericksburg, San Antonio, Austin. Street to Kitchen sells some of our wines. Who Chef G just won a James Beard Award. She's the first female James Beard recipient in Houston.
Cool.
And they have a rosé or red there. They had our Viognier. I don't know if they sold out of it or not. And then we are in a few wine bars or shops throughout Austin and San Antonio area. And so, but for the most part,
you got to come here.
You got to come here.
All right.
Or visit, visit a handful of restaurants that we'd like to see our wine in. Are very proud that our wines are there.
Do you sell on your website?
We are working on that.
Okay.
We had a marketplace for during COVID, but sort of shut that down.
I got
but
you.
We're in the works of hopefully selling on our website here soon.
Okay.
There's an app or two that we have a few of our wines at. I think Somley and Texas Wine Club have released a few of our wines. But look, we're a very small winery. So when I say small, our 2018 vintage was only 1,800 cases. 2018 was 1,600 cases. Our 2019 was 1,800 cases. 2020 was just at 2,000 cases.
Okay.
We're a 3,400 case winery at the moment. And so, our ideas of expansion aren't necessarily based on volume.
Yeah.
Our ideas of expansion are based on estate volume, expanding, so planting more grapes, keeping the vineyard healthy and thriving. And it's based on our relationships with our hill country growers and our 2 or 3 growers in the high plains of West Texas. And that's very driven by, relationships are what it's about. But also the quality of the grape growing. And so you can't always hit the floor running, right?
Yeah.
So we also custom farm an acre of Syrah at Neil Newsom's, which we're excited about. We finally had our very first harvest this year. Got about close to 4 tons off of a single acre of Syrah, and the Syrah's beautiful. We're cellaring it on New French Oak and have about 175, 200 cases of that hopefully in a few years.
Yeah.
And that's a great relationship that we have with Neil and Daniel Pate, his manager. So we're excited about the Syrah coming out of Newsom's. We planted that, 4 years ago. And so, that's a long time to wait, right?
It is. So what, in your opinion, is the number one thing that sets Adega Vinho apart that would say, make a listener say, I really have to go check that place out. I want to go as soon as I can.
That's an easy question to answer. What sets Adega Vinho apart from many wineries in the state and lots of wineries throughout the world is that we grow a large percentage of our wine here on property. I'm an owner of this company as well with my brother and his wife. All 3 of us are actively participating in the grape growing, the winemaking, the management. Our hospitality professionals who are also in the tasting room, every weekend, they are educated wine enthusiasts or wine professionals. Most of our employees that work with us are full-time.
Okay.
And so you're not just getting your local part-timer on the weekend pouring some wine because they think it's a good way to make a little extra money. We have people who love wine and they're professional about it, and it's their life, and that's what it is for us as well. And so it's not just us getting some grapes and making wine; it's a lifestyle, and it's a difficult lifestyle at times. And but we never want to focus on that. We want to focus on the positives, and that's growing grapes and making wine. So we're wine growers. When you come here, you'll just see it right off the bat, and you'll experience it through our tastings or our glasses. And that's what really sets us aside are the people who work here and what we do here. And we're not the only ones who do it. But we got to brag on ourselves. We love to make wine.
Yeah.
And so that's the main thing that's setting us apart, is that we love to grow wine and we love to make relationships with our customers. And we love hearing all the positives and even the negatives if they ever have them.
And there you have it from Michael himself. I loved sitting down to chat with Michael in this interview. I was talking to him, and I want to put together a t-shirt that says, "Eat, drink, and be merry, and bring a chair." And it says Adega Vinho on it. I thought that was a great quote from him, where he talked about those events they had on the property. And I thought that t-shirt would be perfect. And there at Adega, as you heard, they really do it all, from the farming all the way to the winemaking, and really try to be sustainable and low interventionist in the winemaking process. And their wines are winning awards, as you heard in the interview, with that Great Grand Champion Award. And their wines are young. Like I said, he just started their vintages in 2017 and 2018. So I definitely expect, if you pay attention, down the road, you're going to see even more awards being given to this amazing winery and the wines that he's producing there. Now, when you go to visit, the tasting room is really fun. It's kind of got this modern retro feel. There's a lot of places to sit and enjoy your wine. They even have a vinyl record player there. So if you're into the retro vinyl, you can play records in the tasting room. Their artwork that they have all around the walls of the tasting room are from different artists. They rotate that through and they allow people to purchase that artwork. So every time you come, the wall decorations might look a little different. So it's like a new experience every time. And the staff, oh man, the staff is so responsive. They're there to help you and educate you. You're going to have a really great experience when you go to sit in the tasting room there at Adega Vinho. And check out that food truck while you're there. Amazing pairings with their wines. Now, before you go, make sure you check out their website. It's www.adegavinho.com. Now, you're going to find a lot of things on their website when you go check it out. You'll find more information about their story. You'll hear a little bit about their sustainability practices and that low interventionist winemaking philosophy that Michael has. You can check out some of their upcoming events. You can make reservations to come do your tasting. And you can even find information on the Friends and the Founders Club and join right there from the website if you really want to do that. And lastly, they do have a store online with a limited number of bottles there. Check out that website. Again, it's www.adegavinho.com. Now, don't forget, when you go to see them, make sure you tell them you heard about them on this podcast, Texas Under Vine. Now, after our interview concluded, I was able to sit down and enjoy a nice tasting of their wines, what they had on their menu that day. And one of the ones I fell in love with was actually their 2020 Estate Mourvedre. So this wine is directly from their estate, the Bilger family vineyards, and it's got kind of a leathery and smoky effect on your nose, but on the palate, it's a lot of fruit just really bursting forth. Things like raspberry and plum. It would go great, I think, with some smoked meat. So it's time to wheel out that barbecue and enjoy that Mourvedre. If you go, you make sure you try that Mourvedre if you can. It is amazing. I made that my wine library bottle for this episode. Well, with that, it's time to, I guess, get my nose out of the cellar and follow the fruit down the road wherever it takes me. There's a lot more great wine destinations here in Texas that I know you're anxious to hear about, and I want to bring more of that information to you as well. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast, will you do me a favor? Leave me a rating or a review wherever you get this podcast. If you're watching the video on YouTube, you can actually click the like button and the subscribe to get access to this channel to know exactly when new episodes are released, and share it with your friends. Tell them all about it. And more importantly, when you go to Adega Vinho for yourself and experience it, come back here and leave a comment. Tell me what your favorite aspect of that vineyard was in the comments. I'd love to read it and see what you thought about it as well. Now, I'd also like to solicit any feedback you'd like to send me about the show. So if there are places that you would like to see me visit, I'm still working on planning out my schedule of locations, and I'm up to suggestions if you have some. So send me that feedback, as well as if there's anything you really love about the show or anything you think I could improve on a little bit, make sure and send me those comments and that feedback. You can email me at scott@texasundervine.com or go to the socials. I'm on almost all of the social platforms at Texas Under Vine. So you should be able to find me that way to send me a direct message there if that's your preferred method, whatever you'd like to do. Or again, leave a comment on the YouTube video. Whatever you'd like to do is great. I do relish that feedback and take it all to heart. And lastly, you can also check out my website at texasundervine.com to see a lot more content and to see the back episodes and all of that. It's kind of my central location there at the website. And with that, my time is up. So make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow my socials to be notified anytime the next episode is released. And until then, happy trails and bottoms up, y'all. Thanks for listening to Texas Under Vine. We strive to provide you with the best information about wine businesses all over Texas. Be sure to check out our website at texasundervine.com and follow us on our socials at Texas Under Vine to stay up on all the upcoming episodes. Please email us with any suggestions or feedback. Also, contact us if you're interested in donating, sponsoring, or advertising on the podcast, just to help us cover our expenses and bring even more great info to you in future episodes. Above all, travel safely, and most especially, drink responsibly. Vine Trippers, have I got a deal for you. So if you haven't checked out the Texas Wine Club yet, you have to go check it out. So you can get wine clubs at all of these different great wineries that I've talked about in the episodes. But if you can't get a chance to get to those places and you want to sample some of those various wines, this is the perfect fit for this podcast. So I've partnered with Texas Wine Club. If you go to their website, they scour the whole state. They choose great wines from all over the Texas wineries, and they put them together into packs that they ship out every quarter. You could pick out a package of 3, 6, or 9 bottles, and every quarter you can get a taste of different wineries throughout Texas without having to travel to them. So if you've wanted to taste some of the great wine I've talked about on this podcast, here's your chance without having to travel. So what you're going to want to do is go to www.txwine.com and pick your package that you want to try. And when you put in my code, Texas Under Vine, that's all one word, TEXASUNDERVINE, as your coupon code, you'll get $20 off your purchase. So head on over there. You can also find the link in the show notes here for this podcast, and go check out Texas Wine. They're a perfect fit with this podcast. So go drink some great wine.